Hey guys, it's April 8th, 2018, and this is your episode 140 of At Percussion. I'm your host, Casey Cangelosi, and with me, as usual, are Laurel Black.
Hi.
And Megan Arns.
Hello.
Ben Charles, how's it going, buddy?
Hi, everybody. Doing well.
Good. You guys, well, our guest today is an associate professor at Lee University in Cleveland, Tennessee. He's performed in clinic all over the world, and I could list these places. There's so many, but just trust me, it's all over the place. He's been called a master of musical nuance by PAS's Percussive Notes, and simply phenomenal by National Public Radio. He is a very active composer, and his latest CD is titled Phoenix. So please welcome Dr. Andy Harnsberger. How's it going, Andy?
Great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, sure. Great to have you. Ben, you were going to say something, I think.
Yeah, so I wanted to save this for when I actually started the recording. Andy and I go way back because I took a lesson with Andy Harnsberger, I think when I was 14 years old, maybe 15. And the story behind that is that my first teacher, Donald Bick, who taught at Virginia Commonwealth University, was also one of Andy's teachers, and he had Andy in as a guest artist. And at the time, I thought it was cool that I got to help a professional marimba player put his marimba together. Years later, I realized how lame that actually was. But Andy, since we both shared the same teacher, and I know that Mr. Bick was a huge influence on me, could you talk about your sort of studies with Donald Bick and what you learned from him on a larger scale?
Sure. Oh my gosh.
And it's interesting to me also because Mr. Bick was very much a timpanist, and Andy is well known as a marimba player, and Mr. Bick was not by trade a marimba player. So sorry.
Oh yeah. No. He always even said, "You'll never make a living playing marimba," and that's the way he talked. But the thing that was cool about it was that he really encouraged me and the other students that were there with me at the time to get involved in as many things percussion as we could. I learned a lot from him as a timpanist and orchestral player, and that's what I wanted to be, was an orchestral player. And then, we never know where our career is going to go. So the marimba thing just kind of happened after I left Eastman. I just started playing a lot more, and then I don't know if I'm pigeonholed as a marimba player, but certainly that's where most people know me. But from Bick, I got the opportunity to really do the things that I loved, but he also was a huge influence to push me into other areas of percussion. You never know what gig you're going to take, and you need to be prepared to take any gig.
Why do all the teachers sound like that? I feel like my teachers, they're like, that's the same voice.
Every teacher has a voice.
I know, every teacher has a voice, like a very particular voice. Ben, is that accurate, or is that just like the general, like, I'm making fun of my teacher voice?
It sounds a little angrier than I remember. He kind of chewed his words. It's kind of hard to describe.
What do you think that, our students, do you think they impersonate our voices?
I bet they do.
I actually asked my students, and only one would fess up to, apparently I have a walk that he imitates.
we have a student who, I'm thinking of Tyler. He can imitate everyone so well, and it's pretty incredible. I think he has a hard time doing you and I, because I don't think we're not that distinctive. But the students who are distinctive, man, it's just hilarious. Oh, yeah. He's so good at it. Yeah, Ben, why don't you say something about this teacher?
I don't know. He was just a very, very big influence on me at a young age. I kind of got lucky getting set up with him as a teacher when I started high school. And like I said, he set a lesson up with Andy for me. And then it was a year or two later, he actually set me up to play in an Evelyn Glennie masterclass. Again, when I was like 15 or 16 years old. I was so young, I remember he actually had to come pick me up at school and drive me to the masterclass.
That's cute.
And yeah, so he was a huge influence, and he actually passed away my senior year of high school right before I was going to take college auditions. So that was very difficult, but I remember his brother was at his house kind of helping clean stuff up to get, the house sold and all that. And I was helping out, and his brother just sort of said to me and my friend Tyler that were there, he said, like, you guys have to do this. You have to continue on. Like, you're his legacy, and if you don't do this, like, that little, musical path, so to speak, will just die. And his brother was not a musician at all, so that was like a profound impact on me at a very young age. Like, I have to do this. If I don't do this, this will be gone.
Yeah. Wow. Well, hey, Andy, the CD Phoenix, which I've got right here, came out, I guess, 2 years ago now. And I picked it up at PASIC, and I've been listening to it. It sounds fantastic. It's a Garnet House production, which those of you listened in the past, you might know that is John Park's recording house. And yeah, of course, it sounds totally fantastic, and I've really enjoyed it. And you said it just got picked up or reviewed by Fanfare magazine, is that right?
Yeah, they did a feature on it. They did an interview of me and a feature article on the CD. And a review that came out in February edition of Fanfare.
What's your opinion as far as recording CDs nowadays? Obviously, you've recorded a CD, you're continuing to record CDs. A lot of times we get in that conversation of, should you just go all digital? Should you focus on the whole, video audio only thing? It seems like that wave it's an interesting conversation that we have. And recently, Laurel and I have thought harder about, let's make a traditional CD. I kind of am more inspired to do that now than I was a year ago. Do you have any thoughts to contribute to that conversation?
I think having the CD is a fantastic idea. I like the idea of holding something in my hand and actually reading the liner notes. Of course, as a professor at a university, you use it for promotional purposes as well and things like that. But so having the CD to give to your colleagues is, that's kind of a big deal. My view on the whole video thing is, if I put a video out, it's going to be a live performance. I want people to see that, yes, you can actually make mistakes and it's okay. I'm not really about getting a professional video done that is note perfect and looks immaculate and sounds immaculate. To me, that's not real. And when students go to YouTube to look for videos of pieces and they see this immaculate production of a work, they're getting the wrong impression of what that's really going to sound like live when they play it. And so I try, the only videos I have up are live performances. I don't even have anything up there that's not live.
Andy, so your CD consists of all original works. I'm curious of how long it took you to compose all of these, and if you started composing them with the end goal of the CD in mind, or if it's just a collection of things that you've written throughout the years and that became the theme for your record.
That's great. Yeah. The first piece that I ever wrote was Vertigo, and I wrote that in 1998, and it is actually on my first CD titled Vertigo.
Yeah.
I reworked it a little bit for this CD, so it's pretty much the same piece, but there's some additions to it and some rewriting that went on for that. Words Unspoken I wrote in 1999, and that's probably the piece that I've played the most often. I've performed that about 680 times. So I didn't really, when I wrote those two pieces, I didn't really have an idea that it was going to be a Harnsberger CD of all Harnsberger works or anything like that. And I actually started recording a different CD in the early 2000s, and Words Unspoken was going to be on it. But then the project kind of fell through and I dropped it. Just didn't feel like it was as important. And I'm glad that I did that. It gave me a lot of time to get some other pieces together. So this just worked out perfectly, I think.
Very cool.
I had a sort of follow-up question to that. What inspired you to record Vertigo again? Because by all accounts, the first recording was very good.
Oh, thanks. Actually, it was John Parks' idea. He said you should redo Vertigo, and I think what he said was you need to show everybody you can still play it. I thought it was a great idea. I needed a little bit more time on the CD anyway, so it was perfect. And it was nice to have some other piece with ensemble on the disc.
Cool. Yeah. Excellent disc. I was going to say, back on the topic of, do you record a CD? Do you just focus on videos? Is anyone really making money? Digital music, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot to say there. But the most successful setting I've had with my students in, say, studio class or a freshman techniques class, the best situation I've had as far as convincing them about a piece or talking about a piece is good recording, playing, audio, and score in their lab. I feel like that's just the most productive thing. That's the most conversation comes out of that. And I've done the thing where we sit and watch a good video performance, and that's okay. But it's there's something better about just good audio and the score.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
Yeah. And that's not just my opinion. That's just going from, how much they raise their hand afterwards, or their excitement for what they saw afterwards.
Oh, yeah. Well, it makes sense. If we're watching a video, I think they say when you're, awake and looking at things, 60% of your brain power goes to what you see. So if you're just watching someone play, like, that's what you're going to get the most out of. Whereas if what you're looking at is the score, you're going to make all these connections, I think, between what you hear, and what you're looking at.
I get the feeling of reading a book versus watching a movie. If you're reading a book, your imagination is so active. It's like, that's what like reading the score is. Less information ends up being more in your head,
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you got there, Megan?
Well, I was just going to ask about your experience recording. We had John Parks on the show like 100 episodes ago or something, and talked a lot about his recording studio and what he's doing down there in Tallahassee. I'm just curious of your experience recording with him and with his students, and what that was like.
I had a miserable experience.
I'm sure. Right.
For a few reasons. One, the studio was like 50 degrees. I couldn't play. I was cramping. So the first day, we only got like half of Palmetto Moon recorded, and I only had 5 days to get the whole CD done. The next day, I was so sore from cramping that I didn't play at all, and they tracked Vertigo that day. And
wow, why was the studio so cold? Do you figure out what happened?
So ridiculous. It was crazy. They kept turning the heat up, and the next day it would be cold again.
Weird.
It eventually got up to like 64, and I was able to, cram the last 3 days to get all of the rest of the pieces done. But so that part of it was miserable. The other part of it that was miserable is that John hears the grass grow, and he will not let you have one slightest mistake. So if you're playing these fast runs and you don't even know that you've missed a note, and John says, you hit a C natural instead of a B natural, we need to do it again. It's like, are you kidding me? I've played it 100 times now.
Wow.
You just hear him on the other end, and he says, Andy, do you trust me? Very calm. It's very relaxing. You trust me? Yes. All right. Just keep playing it until I tell you got it.
Oh man, that's cool.
Oh,
That's so cool.
gosh.
It sounds great. I mean, I feel like, hey.
I mean, yeah, the finished product is like note perfect. Everything is perfect. And that's what his goal is. He's like, you're making a reference recording, and people need to know how this is supposed to sound.
Yeah.
What your ideas as a composer materialize as a performer. And so I'm really happy with the final product. It's going to take me a while to get my nerve up to do it again, because it was really, really hard.
Yeah. Laura, what do you got?
Well, what you just said about you're making a reference recording reminded me of a conversation I had with our recording engineer here at James Madison. Last week, I was speaking with him about potentially doing a recording project in the hall, and I've never looked into doing that before, but something he said that was really useful was to think about who you're making this CD for and your level of like perfection that you expect from yourself. Because he said the most frustrating projects for him are ones where the performer can't decide. Like, am I aiming for absolutely perfect, or can I let some things go if the expression comes through, and I'd never thought about that before.
Laurel, that exact thing has stopped me from like even starting a conversation with the recording engineers because I don't know. It's like, wait,
yeah,
I want to take as much time with this as I need to, and they don't have that kind of time,
Well, and I think on that
it would
note,
be so rude of me.
It's almost easier if you're doing it yourself rather than flying to Florida State to record for a week, because if you're recording on your own, you have a bad day, like, all right, whatever, I'll just get it tomorrow or something, and you can kind of splice on the fly, almost like you're almost editing and recording at the same time. But
plus when I record it myself, there's this like weird hiss in the background and the mics pop and you get all that.
What?
As in, like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Oh, okay.
Imperfections.
I was going to say, Casey, like, I totally get what you're saying, Casey, especially since you've done so much recording of yourself, like you probably have it down to a science. I bet that would be a totally different experience going into a studio.
But I mean, I don't. That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's like, oh, sure, it's fine for like YouTube, but oh my gosh, I wouldn't dare, make my own CD or something. It's just not even close,
Just record it on this mic that we record the podcast on. It'll be
on
fine.
this Blue Snowball?
Yeah. Sounds
the $60 Blue Snowball would be good.
Yeah.
Actually, the $60 Blue Snowball does the voice on my end better than my more expensive Yeti microphone, because it just, for some reason, it's a lower volume mic and it doesn't pick up the speaker in the background. It's funny how that can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that John Parks lists the audio equipment that he uses on the CD, and I was so happy to find the digital audio workstation he uses is the same one I use. He uses Samplitude, because oftentimes students will ask me, what DAW do you use? How do I get into that? And I say, I use Samplitude, and they're like, what the heck is Samplitude? And it makes me think, oh, does nobody even use that? Or like, should I not be using that? Or like, I should probably be using Ableton or Pro Tools or one of those more popular ones. But I always thought, no, Samplitude is really, really good. I really like it. And I really think it's great. So I'm so happy to see, oh yeah, someone who does know what they're doing uses it too.
Well, I had a quick question, actually not really a quick question perhaps, but Casey has a student, Caleb, that did a class here a few weeks ago, and Caleb, I thought, did a nice job of talking about this, and I've heard Casey talk about this, and that is, how did you start composing? What drove you to start composing, and what sort of path did your compositional career take as an aside to your performance career, Andy?
When I first got out of Eastman, I wanted to write a piece that I could play at universities with students. And so I started on Vertigo. It took me a long time to write it. It was the first thing that I'd ever tried to write other than marching band shows. And so it was really, really frustrating and really challenging. But the reason I wanted to do that was because there wasn't anything out there. There was not very much music out there at the time. The only things that I could think of, even off the top of my head now, that were available for marimba and percussion were like a marimba spiritual and Mike Burrett's Shadow Chasers. So I wanted something that was unique to me, and so I figured I could just write it, and that would be the most unique. So that's how I started, and once I started the process of composing, I found out that I learned a lot about my inner musician that I was not expressing as a performer. And so it actually made me a better performer to write some things out that I felt strongly about. I need to say that I don't really vision myself as a composer. I'm not a real composer, in my opinion, because I've never taken a lesson on composition. I've only done score study, my own score study, and done a ton of listening to a lot of other composers that I respect. And I'm just writing for a medium that I know well. I don't really consider myself a real composer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Of course, we disagree, but okay.
Yeah, I'd say it makes sense, I guess, but disagree.
Okay. No, that is a fun conversation, though.
Well,
it definitely is.
When we spoke with Jennifer Higdon, Casey talked about like what you perceive as your limitations actually become your personality as a composer. And so, like, yeah, primarily writing for marimba, but you know the instrument very well and obviously write very well for it. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is fun to talk though. Everyone has their different qualifications of what a composition is and what a new composition is. And if you're just writing in a traditional style, you don't meet my qualifications of what a composition is, but you might meet these other people's, or like it has to be new to be considered a composition or whatever. But it's cool, and that your qualifications for a composer, you don't feel you fit them, but we can sit here and think so.
Well, if I can do the segue to the next topic, Andy,
Yes.
How would you feel if someone commissioned you to write a piece for 11 gongs?
I think it's 13, Ben.
13 gongs.
13 gongs.
Maybe a very rare historical set of gongs that could be hard to come across. Would you write
So
that piece?
that was a really good segue, Ben, but I've actually got one planned. So we're gonna do two segues. So Laurel and
All right,
I have
here's segue
teamed
number
up.
2. Audience can vote on which they liked better.
Yeah, we'll do a poll. Yeah, we'll go ahead and do another poll as we always do. And yeah, so you guys, what is this sound? This is not really a what's the sound segment, but it's going to tie into what Laurel has to report on. So check this out. All right, Laurel, what was that?
That would be, my guess, is the end of Turandot.
Yeah, Turandot, that's right. Yeah, so and that happened to be Doug Smith. Megan, I think you know Doug Smith from Missouri?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so that happened to be Utah Opera, and I just Googled it, thinking like, I bet some percussionist has a video up of one of the gong segments for Turandot. So yeah, Laurel, what is this little news item you found about Puccini's Turandot?
Yeah, so Puccini's gongs that he had especially made for him for the composition and premiere of Turandot are for sale after having been lost for quite some time. So he began the opera compositionally in about 1920, and when he died in 1924, it was unfinished. So the end of the opera was completed by someone else, and since then has had several endings rewritten for it throughout time, but typically the one that's performed the most is the one that was finished right after he died. These gongs, there's 13 of them, were lost for quite some time until a percussionist for New York City Opera named Howard Van Heining found them. So he had performed Turandot several times. Oh, and on that note, some people say Turandot, some people say Turandot.
Yeah.
And there's an argument about it, so I don't know which one is right.
I feel like I hear the hard T more often, but I certainly hear the soft one as well.
Yeah, I've heard both.
It doesn't matter.
So anyway, Howard Van Heining wanted to find these gongs because he played the part to Turandot so many times, and eventually he located them, and of all places, he found them at the Stivanello Costume Company in Manhattan, who had provided costumes to all these opera companies across the country, and they just so happened to have these gongs in a crate in a back room. So he rented them at first for productions and then later convinced the owner to let him buy them, and he paid $8,000 for them. So Howard passed away in 2010, so now his widow is in charge of these gongs, and for a while she was renting them out to different companies for the production, but when they got lost once for 3 days, she decided to stop doing that and decided she's going to keep them or to sell them. So now Puccini's gongs are for sale. Curiously, you guys, how much do you think these would go for? Or how much do you think she's asking?
I read it, so sorry.
I read it.
You read it? Ben, did you read it?
Yeah.
I could share how much I would think they should go for. $8,000.
$8,000.
Well, it does. I mean, it does kind of bring in the question because you hear so many times someone saying, "Oh, you need to play Histoire du Soldat with this kind of bass drum, this size bass drum." By the way, Ben, that has an L, l'Histoire du Soldat, but that's okay. That's
I thought this argument would come back.
Yeah, that's an old podcast joke.
Wow.
But like people say that all the time, like, "Oh no, you should really use exactly this because that's what the composer had, like that's what they had in their ear." And sometimes I think like, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure, that's a good idea, but what if they had this clearly better sounding drum?" Like it's not like all composers had every choice on the planet, you know? So like, are these special gongs? You know,
Right.
are they the perfect gongs? It's not like we have evidence Puccini had all these gongs to choose from and traveled all over and just found the perfect gongs. Like, no.
Even at that,
Right.
like I had the thought of if they were wood blocks, today they wouldn't sound very good. You know, like they might have even changed sound since Puccini heard them. So
Right, like percussion
Laurel,
instruments.
you were saying the price is just outrageous.
So
Yeah.
sorry, Laurel, back to the price.
So, Howard's widow, Marlene, would like to sell these gongs for $2 million, and which is a lot of money. And to go off what Casey's saying of, you should play it on this, historically speaking, we would probably view these as the quote unquote official Turandot gongs because Puccini had them made and he was thinking of using these exact ones in the production. What's interesting, though, is people who have heard them say they actually don't sound that good. So, like, perhaps more modern-made ones sound better than these, and which brings in an interesting question. Do you go with what is historically the most accurate thing, or do you just make it sound as great as it possibly could? I will mention that part of that $2 million, she wants to pay someone to write a really percussion-heavy finale to the opera in honor of her husband, which I do think is a nice idea, but still $2 million is quite a lot of money. And the source that I have for this particular story is a blog called The Way of the Gong, which is written by Michael Bettine, who's actually going to join us, I think, 2 weeks from now for an episode. Yeah, so I was just kind of researching him and found this story and thought it was really cool. And he had sort of announced it on Facebook, a few weeks ago before he wrote up this article. And there are some percussionists, especially a lot of like opera orchestra players who had some stuff to say about these gongs. And one of them was Trey Wyatt of the San Francisco Symphony, who said, "My dear friend in the Florence Opera showed me their Puccini gongs. They're made in Pistoia. They were interesting, but didn't sound great. And they later replaced them with tuned Thai gongs. And I received a call from an insurance company in New York a few years ago as this person was trying to insure these exact same gongs for $100,000. And I told them that was way too much. While they have historical value, I sell the 13-note Puccini gong set for $8,000. She'd be a hell of a salesperson / carn artist to get $2 million for them."
Yeah, like how much of that is for the commission? How much is for the actual gongs?
And how much of that is just to gather some money at this point in your life?
Yeah, sorry, Laurel, quick interjection there, because you mentioned Trey Wyatt. Trey Wyatt owns California Percussion.
Yeah.
And we just rented the low octave of Thai gongs from him. And that was a crazy experience. Maybe I'll tell that story another time of like trying to get those gongs here. Because they're so heavy and, they have to be shipped by freight. And it was just a crazy experience. But Trey would know because he's, dealing with gongs and he owns this rental company in this giant warehouse with all these instruments. So that's interesting that the quote is from him. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's back to her price. My gosh, $2 million. There's something Michael says in his little blog post is there are many different ways to measure value of something. Of course, these are historically significant. For some, they may be emotionally significant. And then there's their actual value. But it seems like, if they were bought for $8,000 a couple of decades ago, like $2 million is just not even something to consider.
Well,
but at the same time, at the same time, if someone, is a huge Puccini scholar or a huge fan, or, maybe these gongs, especially if they don't sound great, maybe they belong in an art museum. I bet someone will pay for it.
Well, and that's what I started looking into, because I was kind of curious, like, okay, like how much, of course, we know there are big historical items that sell for a lot of money. And one thing I think, Laurel, we were poking around, the dress from The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy's dress, sold for something like $1.6 million. Mm-hmm. So while I don't think it is a historically significant, I mean, I guess maybe it's a historic piece of film, costuming, but are Puccini's gongs that are used in Turandot, are they more significant than that? It's just, I don't know. I mean, personally, I think the gongs are cooler than the dress, obviously, but like how famous is Puccini, you know what I mean? And how much do composers' things go for? And actually, I found a really cool resource called the Beethoven Auction Database. This is at San Jose State University, the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Library, and they have this huge listing of all these things that have gone up for auction of Beethoven. So I grabbed just a few for you guys just to get some perspective of like, okay, what are composers' memorabilia things maybe worth? And I was kind of disappointed in how hard this was to find. I was trying to find like, where's Mozart's, I don't know, certainly we have something of his, right? Like where's his chair, or where is his, I don't know, something. But I did find a lot of Beethoven. So let's start with the first edition of Wellington's Victory, Opus 91, U.S. currency sale price. Anybody want to guess? The first edition of Wellington's Victory.
First edition?
Yeah.
$80,000.
$80,000. That's a pretty good guess. Yeah, works. Opus 91, auction information, Sotheby's Auction House in London, lot number 2, biographical reference, Beige Auction Index 1985 to 1995. So there's like all this information confirming it. Sale price $650.
What?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, here's another one. Let's see. Buyer, American Beethoven Society, sold to the American Beethoven Society on March 11th, 2015. Biographical reference, Beethoven Journal, Volume 30, Number 2, Winter 2015, on page 81 through 82, with images. This is a lock of Beethoven's hair, and it sold for $10,268.
Yeah. What are you going to do with that? I mean, who bought that? Where is it?
Well, I don't know, but like, what are you going to do with the gongs too? I mean, I guess you could say like, oh, hey, this is it with Puccini's actual gongs, and people are saying, no, they actually don't sound as good, and they don't work as well. Like, is it worth $2 million to do that, Well, or to have that, or would you just look at them?
What it comes down to, as we're kind of getting at here, is this is all. We're trying to put a price on the value of something, not a price on the materials of something, which right. It's quote unquote priceless. Like there is no price. It's not like we're just auctioning off the copper used in the gongs or something like that. But I had two other interesting little anecdotes here, and I don't know why this didn't pop in my head earlier, but I just looked it up. A few years ago, actually several years ago, I think it was around. Let me find the date. Let's see here. 1980, it looks like it was. Lee Howard Stevens purchased Claire Omar Musser's personal marimba. How much do you think that instrument sold for? This is not a Musser marimba. This is the Musser marimba.
Man, I don't even want to guess. I don't want to sound stupid.
Let's let our guest guess. Andy?
Yeah, let's make Andy guess.
I'd say $5,000.
$7,080.
Wow, good guess. There you go.
Yeah, which I mean, again, it's like, yeah, it's cool that it was his, but it's just a marimba, and if you go to perform it in a concert, like people aren't necessarily going to come to hear Musser's marimba played, especially if it's not Musser playing it, which obviously it's not. But there was another one of these recently that outside of the percussion world that I wanted to share, and this popped up on a bunch of technology websites. Steve Jobs made a job application, and it's a very, very poorly written little sort of one-page resume And one of my favorite lines is it asks if he has access to transportation, and he says, possible but not probable. This is from 1973, a Steve Jobs half-assed job application, as it's listed on this website, sold for $174,000. And it's one piece of paper that just kind of happens to have his signature on it. So yeah, again, it's like, to some Steve Jobs collector, that's a big deal, but what are you going to do with a poorly filled out job application from Steve Jobs in 1973?
Well, and that's what I guess, we're trying to do. Like, we're not trying to just determine the value of the material, but like compared to like Beethoven is definitely more famous and known than Puccini. And if his stuff sells for this much, are these gongs worth that much more,
It's just the crazy thing to me, though, is either way, the Canterbury, the Musser marimba, or the gongs, actually, not that you would necessarily use them for this, but they actually have a practical use. You can see, you can hear them, and hear the past. With the Steve Jobs job application, it's just a piece of paper.
Yeah, of course.
In kind of poor condition. It's not really all that interesting.
Yeah, there was a little story about Beethoven's skull. This is not something I found on that same database. It was a Huffington Post thing. But his skull is apparently up for sale, and it was held in a university in California. They were doing DNA research and investigating more about Beethoven's condition, I guess. So in that sense, it might be practical. But again, the estimated value was something like I want to see if I have it here. The estimated value, asking value is $100,000. And the company estimated it would sell for only $10,000 to $20,000. Dude, that's Beethoven's skull. Like these gongs can't sell for two. Anyway, it's interesting.
Yeah. But it's also
Laura,
like,
were you done? Oh, sorry, Megan, go ahead.
No, it's okay. So, I think it's also just like where, okay, maybe there's some crazy collector that wants to have these things, and it would mean a lot to them to have them. Right. I think also part of it is like, where will it be enjoyed by the most amount of people among a collection of other possibly similar items? So like for the Puccini gongs, to me, it's like that should go in the Rhythm Discovery Center, right?
Yeah, right.
And I think that a lot of those items, I don't know, maybe this person's just trying to make a lot of money off them, but clearly they're not like her family's history. But, a lot of things are donated to art museums or to the Rhythm Discovery Center by a family member because they know they will be taken care of beyond their time, and they will not be sold, but they will be enjoyed and valued by people who really appreciate that type of thing. So to me, it's like, this person should donate them to Rhythm Discovery Center.
Oh, for sure. Well, I think there's no argument there. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. Yeah. And you just hope, the amount that they're actually able to get, which is maybe
they should.
Right. It's like, let's say they can only get $10,000 for them because someone says, oh, that's kind of neat, but they're in bad shape and they don't sound great. It's like, dude, it'd be worth more than $10,000 to have them in the Rhythm Discovery Center. So project for someone who wants to make their mark in percussion, get this person to donate the gongs.
Exactly. Not it.
Not it. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, not it. Yeah. How about Laurel, I'm sorry, were you done? We went on a lot of tangents.
Yeah, no, we've covered it.
Yeah, very cool. Good find, Laura. I thought that was really...
Yeah, that was really awesome.
That was fun and totally
I'm looking forward to talking to the gong man.
Yeah, I want him to tell us all about that. It's very, very cool. Hey, does someone have a Facebook question for Andy? Let's get him back in the game here.
Well, Megan said she had a question.
I have a non-Facebook question. I have a question from myself. Andy, I am curious about your trips to Colombia and Argentina. So it seems like you've been to South America several times in the past decade, and I'm just wondering what you went for and if those festivals were connected and what your experiences were like there.
It was awesome. I loved being there. I was invited to go back to Colombia again this year, and I'll go to Brazil in August, and hopefully Mexico in September for the Chiapas Marimba Festival down there that they have. But the Latin people are really into percussion, and they love marimba, and it's really cool. You play for these really large audiences, and everybody's very enthusiastic. And the Argentina trip, Angel Fret runs that, and when I was there, I met the Tambarimba percussion ensemble, and they run a festival in Colombia. So the next year, they got me to come down to Colombia, and so you just go and you meet these other people who run festivals, and if you, I guess I made a good impression. So I keep getting invited back. So it's really awesome.
I've done Angel's before.
I think you did it the year before I did, I think.
Oh, is that right? I forget what year I did it, but yeah, what a blast. I mean, just, yeah, what a great time.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Did you spend any time in Buenos Aires?
No, I did not.
I had some time at the end, and Andy Bliss and I toured Buenos Aires a little bit, and yeah, I'm like, yeah, if you ever do it again, just take the time to just take a day and see like the graveyard with Evita's tombstone, and it's just gorgeous. And go to the opera house, especially tour the opera house. Just pay for a guided tour. It's awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah, very, very cool. How about a Facebook question, Ben?
Yeah, sure. So we had a question from Parker David Stockford, and he says, of all the places or facets in percussion to emphasize, what would you feel is the most important to emphasize during your undergrad as you prepare for grad school audition?
I think the most important thing to emphasize would be to be well-rounded. Try to, like I said earlier about Donald Bick, just try to get your hands involved in everything, just because you don't know where you're going to be in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. Obviously, different schools have different requirements for graduate school. So, do your research and figure out what the different places are requiring. If there's pre-screening, what's on the pre-screening? And if you have to have excerpts together, what excerpts do you have to have? That kind of thing. That's it. I mean, do your research, do your due diligence, and find out what places require and what they want you to have when you walk through the door. Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times students have a perception that, I just really need to be good at marimba to get into this school, or they see Andy has marimba CDs and marimba compositions, so he must be really interested in hot marimba players only. And I mean, it seems like that it's almost always not true, right? I mean, you need well-rounded players. You need players who can play everything, because you got to facilitate the ensembles, and there's like a lot more to do than just the one thing the director happened to stand out in.
Absolutely.
It's a good question though, because it's a common question. So thanks so much for the question.
If I could add two quick tidbits about this. One is Todd Meehan has an excellent article about, I think he just calls it college auditions, but it could be certainly graduate auditions as well. But I think another big thing is going and taking a lesson with the professor. I think is huge, and that does two things. It kind of accomplishes three things actually. One is it's sort of like a pre-audition. Like if you come in really killing it, then that shows that you're a good player. Second of all, it shows the professor that you're actually interested in studying with them, which I think a lot of the time, I guess this is sort of rolling in my third point, but like one thing that's sort of tacky, and I get it, but it's sort of hard to, it's like a good thing to maybe avoid, is telling the professor like, well, I really need a good financial offer to come here, because everybody needs and wants a good financial offer. And if it's there, it's going to be there. If not, it's not going to be there. So it's like, it's tough, because of course we all want that good financial offer, and you want to put it in the professor's ear like, yes, I need money to come here. But I think it can just sort of come across as, well, I only want to come study here if it's a good deal, sort of thing.
Right. The other thing too about going and study with somebody is it will show the teacher how coachable you are. Take a couple of lessons, or at least one lesson before the audition, and then work on the things the teacher tells you to work on. Go back and show him that you can do the things that he asked you to do, or she.
And even if you don't go to that school, for one thing, it can sort of inform just another, like, oh, well, this teacher told me my technique was really weak, that sort of thing. Like maybe if you're going to study with the teacher that focuses less on technique, you have that in the back of your mind that someone else said this. And then also as a student, it could tell you that this person's a terrible fit for you. I think that happens too.
you might not want to study with that teacher after the lesson. You might not get along.
Yeah, of course. Ben, one more Facebook question there, right?
Yeah, we had one more from Parker David Stockford. He said, how can one as a performer, percussion especially, bring that theatric element to pieces when there aren't other effects available to you, i.e. lights, audio track, etc.? And on that note, Andy has a great piece for, I think it's 6 bongos, like 3 pairs of bongos that you put like a camera above, and it's very theatric looking on the projection screen.
I don't know if I have an answer for that. I'm really into the emotion of the music, the emotion that it brings out of you. I think that you can say so many things through your performance and bring different elements to the performance through the emotion that you put into it. So really, to me, that's what it boils down to is, how strongly do you feel about this piece and what are you trying to convey? You can say so many things through music that you can't say in words.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw Michael Burritt perform yesterday, and it's like there was no theatrical element to it. There was no lighting effects. There was no screen, whatever. But he was just theatrical in and of himself. It's Michael Burritt. He doesn't need that. And it's cool if that enhances your performance, but it's not necessary if you play well, I think.
It's kind of back to what we were saying of focus on making a video recording or an audio recording, and we all agreed it'd be a really powerful experience just having good audio and score in front of you, and your mind and imagination finds all these other interesting things instead of, like Laurel said, the video taking 60% of your brain power just to process what you're seeing, So yeah, less can certainly be more. Megan, I think you're going to tell us a little about Big Ears Festival.
Yeah. So with going back to my idea of current event topics, what I usually present on, Big Ears Festival took place this year, last month, March 22nd. And we had mentioned there's a lot of tie-ins that made me want to talk about this today. The first is that we had Andy Bliss on again, probably 100 episodes ago. Yeah. And I remember he talked about Knoxville and the Big Ears Festival. So I think being friends with him on Facebook, I saw some postings that he was going to be interviewing the Bang on a Can composers who were featured at this year's festival. And, I just gave a topic on the Bang on a Can composers, Julie Wolfe, Michael Gordon, and David Lang. So I thought it would be a good time to just fill everyone in about the festival. So their statement from their website is that the Big Ears Festival is a dynamic, interactive experience that explores connections between musicians and artists crossing all musical genres while interfacing with film, performance, and the visual arts. I think this is super cool because Knoxville is not a giant city, and I think it just takes over the entire city. Another article I found had a quote that Big Ears takes place in a walkable radius of historic downtown Knoxville. And it has a range of ornate landmark theaters, refurbished industrial spaces, art galleries, churches, and clubs. And it says it creates its own atmospheric climate along with a center of gravity. And I just love that these festivals, we have one similar here in Columbia. It's less focused on music and more focus on film, called the True False Film Festival. But it draws in absolutely every area of the community. Musicians play before and after the films and are busking. It calls on the whole city to volunteer. A lot of people will even a lot of professors will take the week off to volunteer for the festival and be on different teams. And it takes over all the venues in town. And I just think it's a really cool collaborative concept. So Big Ears focuses more on the music, but all the arts are involved. It started in 2009, but it has some skips and years. So this iteration was actually the 7th festival. And the other thing that drew me to it was an article on NPR this week that was not of particular interest to me since I'm not huge into jazz, but I thought I would mention it. It's called Jazz's Bleeding Edge. You can find it briefly in East Tennessee. And it has some neat descriptions of the festival, but it talks specifically about Milford Graves. Jason Moran talks about there's an unusually high quotient of experimental jazz at this year's festival. And also, the author says genre-defying artists, and some of those that he listed were Arto Lindsay and Bang on a Can All-Stars, which I already mentioned, Bela Fleck and Abigail Washburn, Laurel Halo and Ellie Kessler, and Julie Byrne. So anyway, I just wanted to mention the festival, and also other connections would be that Laurel is from Tennessee. And then also, Andy, I noticed that where you are in Cleveland, or where Lee is in Cleveland, you're only an hour away. So I'm wondering if you know anything about this festival or if you've attended before.
I have attended in the past, but this year I didn't get to go. I really wanted to go up and see Bela Fleck was going to be there, and Bang on a Can All-Star Group was going to be there. I knew Andy was going to be conducting and working with them, and I really wanted to go, but as you know, it's so busy that time of year with recitals and concerts and all kinds of things, and so I just didn't get a chance to make it.
What was your experience like at some of the years that you went?
Oh, it's awesome. I mean, everybody's into it, and it's packed. It's really great. I think it's a wonderful thing for the community up there, and probably gets a lot of business for those shops that are around, and But yeah, it's awesome. It's really great.
Cool. Yeah, I think you're right also about the businesses too. My favorite coffee shop in town, they always, I remember this is like 2 years ago or something. He said, oh yeah, True False is coming up. It's the busiest weekend of the year for us. It brings lots and lots of people to town that might not be coming otherwise,
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Thanks so much, Megan.
Yeah,
Ben, I think you have a question for Andy there, right?
Yeah, I have one question. Actually, it's something that when I first, I guess, became familiar with Andy way back when, I remember hearing about, and I know it's been a thing, but I've never really heard you talk about it, and that is you're the xylophone soloist for a brass band or something, or at least at one
I
point
wanted to add the Jack Daniels brass band.
Yeah, what is that?
So I don't think they've really played that much anymore, but I played with them from 1997. I toured with them from 1997 to 2007. And basically what the group was, it's a brass band modeled after a small town brass band formed by Mr. Jack Daniel in Lynchburg, Tennessee. So they took an old photograph of this brass band and then put it together. Studio musicians in Nashville, all of these guys are just fantastic players. Right after I left Eastman, I moved to Nashville. That was the first city that I lived in. And at the time, Christopher Norton was the percussionist. And he had decided that he didn't have enough time in his college teaching schedule.
He couldn't drink enough?
I don't know the answer to that.
But Andy could.
So yeah,
it's like I got your guy though. I can't keep it, but I got your guy.
So anyway, yeah. So Chris didn't want to do it anymore, and so they asked me if I would come aboard, and it was awesome. Really contemporary arrangements of some really traditional songs, and a lot of xylophone, a lot of sight reading, and it was just great. Got to play all over the country.
I think I remember maybe
cool.
there was a recording of the Whirlwind that you played xylophone on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So did you have a previous interest in like George Hamilton Green xylophone stuff, or was that just something you sort of picked up for the gig?
I did some of it when I was in school with Bick, and I think I actually played the Whirlwind when I was an undergrad, and so they asked me if I had a rag that I would want to play, and that was the one that I chose. So
cool.
Very cool. Yeah, and that's one of it seems the lesser known ones because it's not really a rag like triplets or any of these sort of ones we always think of.
Yeah, and I think it's Joe Green that does.
Yeah, it's quick.
Yeah, it's fast. It's fun.
Well, you guys, I have one little sad but just respectful news item to give. We have such a hard time keeping up with these because we don't always hear about them, so I have to thank our friend Fernando Meza for sharing this piece of news. I don't know if you guys know Marvin Dahlgren, but he passed away just 2 days ago. Just remember, we're recording this on April 8th. He passed April 6th, age 93, 2018. So Marvin Dahlgren is former principal percussionist and assistant timpanist for the Minnesota Orchestra for 48 years. He was in that symphony, and he taught at the University of Minnesota for 35 years.
Wow.
So I assume he's Fernando Meza's predecessor. So, yeah, he has some books: Drum Set Control, Accent on Accents in 2 volumes, and the one I was familiar with, which I think is the big one that people know, is called Four-Way Coordination, which is kind of looks like it's a drum set book, but and it is. It certainly is really useful for drum set. But I've used it with students, and I'll pull them open and just sight read them. And they're really great. Just 4 rhythms, 4 limbs, and yeah, I would definitely recommend Four-Way Coordination by Marvin Dahlgren. So there's a really cool little interview called the Lee Kamen Legacy Project. So Lee Kamen is an important historical radio broadcaster who really advocated for jazz music. So there's these nice series of careers on leekamen.com, and you can find them on YouTube as well. They're uploaded there. So thanks to Marvin Dahlgren, and just happy farewell.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks, Fernando. I did get to meet him. Fernando introduced me to him years ago, and I mean, it's very clear from the interview and in the meeting, I learned he's just like a really happy and jokingly funny guy.
I know for a fact that is the book at UNT that all the jazz majors it was just hard for even the UNT jazz majors.
It's way hard. Yeah. It's I would totally agree. It's really hard, and you think, okay, I'm getting the hang of it, and you get to number 4, and you're like, oh geez, man, that's suddenly really hard. Yeah, but it's great. It's one of those books like, okay, I'm gonna give all the possible combinations, sort of like stick control.
Right.
Students will just like fly down the page on stick control until they get to number 6. So right. It's not like Stone intentionally put number 6, on like that level of that difficulty curve. It's just like, well, by the math, that's where number 6 occurs, Yeah. Hey, Andy, we're going to wrap here in just a minute, I think, but is there anything coming up that you're doing our listeners could maybe look out for, or anything we could plug for you?
Let's see. I just finished a marimba duo called Serpent that Adam Blackstock commissioned me to do.
Yeah, I saw the recording.
We just premiered that on March 19th. So that'll be available. I'm performing at the Arkansas Day of Percussion on May the 5th. And doing some composing this summer. I just finished another piece for marimba and percussion trio. Just finished last night, actually.
Great.
So be on the lookout for that. I don't know when I'll play it, but it's called Unbreakable.
Great. Yeah. Well, thanks so much. And you can find all this good stuff at www.andyharnsberger.com. So, hey, man, Andy, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to chat with you.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah.
It's great
You're
being
very, very welcome, and congrats on all the great happenings you're doing and all your activities. And Megan, Laurel, and Ben, thanks so much.
Yep. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. We'll catch you on 141, everyone. Bye-bye.
Sounds good. Bye.